So, Aubrey, thank you for being here with me today. In one of our early episodes. Today, Aubrey and I will be sharing the bar for a Saint Luna event, kind of an Industry Monday thing. So we figured it would be a good time for me to sit down and get to know her better, because unlike most of the guests, I haven't spent that much time with Aubrey outside of pounding shots and having a good time. So this is an opportunity for all of us to get to know her a little bit.
And it is an absolute pleasure to be a guest here with you at your bar, love.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're at home base today at Little Rascal, at my spot. Would you like me to start you with a drink, just to smooth things over for the camera?
Yeah, I think we were discussing something expensive, stirred, and boozy, my friend.
All right. So how about a little, what is this, Calvados, Armagnac, and rye, I believe?
All the good stuff.
Yeah. I'm sure Mr. McClure will be happy about that.
I know. I sent him an invite for tonight.
Wonderful. I know a bit about you.
Okay.
As a person who does tiki drinks well, who once worked in San Francisco and some other places, but give me a little bit of background. How did you start in hospitality, right out of high school? Did you do other things and find your way to it?
I started bartending when I was in college. I worked at a few spots around Washington, D.C. I helped open up some Kimpton hotel properties in D.C. So that was basically my first foray, was just schlepping around D.C., tending bar with anybody who would allow me. And of course, I started a lot of bartenders did. I lied. I wanted to bartend so bad, and I was waiting tables at this one restaurant. And one of the bartenders was getting ready to quit, and I kept pestering the manager, please, I want to bartend. And he's like, have you ever bartended before? And I'm like, absolutely. Yes, I have. And so, of course, my girlfriend at the time, who had bartended before, just starts making me all these index cards. And of course, this is the early mid-90s. So, it was how to make a LIT, how to make, Sex on the Beach, an amaretto sour, what's in a Jack and Coke, things like that. And it's just I'd be sitting there studying my index cards. And, at this point in time, it was the early 90s. So it was all the shooters, all the fruity, fun, syrupy, made with daily sour mix and roses lime juice and grenadine and, all that fun stuff.
Roses lime, yeah, I haven't heard that in a while.
Yeah, so that's how I started out. Whenever somebody came up to me and was like, well, I want a Scooby snack, I want a broke down golf cart, and I want a Cookie Monster, and
I don't even know some of these.
I know, I'm like a Rolodex of just crappy shooters from the 90s. Great. But, if someone came up to me and asked me for something I didn't know, I'd be like, well, I know 10 ways of making this drink. How do you like yours?
And then out of college, did you stick with bartending or move on to other things?
No. As soon as I graduated Georgetown, I basically joined the United States Marine Corps.
All right.
Yeah, Semper Fi.
All right. Even more of a badass than I get.
Yeah, it was interesting. I left college, so of course I was going to be an officer in the military, and I was enrolled in what they called a MEPS program, a military entrance program for officers. So, but I was I'm going to be a Marine. I need these people to respect me who are going to be serving under me. Right. So I was I want to go to boot camp. And people were like, are you crazy? And I was just, they're like, you can bypass all this stuff. You're going to be working as an officer. You're not going to be what we say, in the shit. And I was like, yeah, but I want the experience, and I need these people to know that I put in the work just as much as they did.
I think that's admirable.
It seemed like the right thing to do at the time.
Being a military brat myself, I've heard plenty of stories about how the non-enlisted versus the officers, grunts, let's say, how they often feel towards the better educated but perhaps less tough seeming individuals.
Off to Paris Island I went, did basic, and then they rode me hard. They knew I was a college grad. They knew I was going to be an officer, and and it turned out my only peace of mind and peace of quiet was on the firing range when we were doing marksmanship, and it was a very zen, very disassociative action for me. So I just happened to have a natural inclination for marksmanship. And when I went out to San Diego to Miramar for OCS, for Officer Candidate School, people took notice.
Wow.
Yeah, so...
Proper marksman as well.
Yeah, I mean, of course, every Marine is. That's what makes the Marines, is that they are exceptional at marksmanship. It's why the Marines came into existence. They were sharpshooters on ships.
Right.
It's why they have the knots on top of their heads so they can determine who was who and who was the enemy. And so that tradition has stuck. I was in Eastern Africa, in Somalia and Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And
oh, wow.
it was always intense. Everybody's like, oh, are you in Desert Storm or Operation, Iraqi Freedom? And I was not. I've fought during the Clinton years, and we weren't in active, in war, but it was constant combat.
Yeah, there's still plenty of things happening.
There's always plenty of things happening, and that's just the unfortunate fact about it. When I got out of the military, I didn't really know what I was going to do, and I tried a corporate job for a hot minute, and I hated it, absolutely hated it. It wasn't the environment that I wanted. You get shot a couple times, then all of a sudden, perspective on life changes a little bit, and I wasn't ready to be so serious after, being in life and death situations for the past 6 years. And
yeah.
A friend of mine was like, well, I got this bartending job. He's like, it's at a resort in Jamaica. And he's like, they're still looking for people. And I was like, well, that sounds amazing. I was like, what's the resort? He's like, hedonism. And I'm just like,
that's the actual name?
Yeah. I was like, isn't that the famous swingers club, resort in Jamaica? He's like, that's exactly where it is, and I'm like, just out of the Marines, I guess at this point in time, I should make the big reveal. And yeah, I used to be a boy at this point. So it all kind of makes sense then.
Yeah.
So came back to DC and bartended for a little bit. And then I met this young German girl who happened to be living in this really strange situation next to my building in DC. And it was half youth hostel, halfway house for reformed drug addicts. And so you'd constantly get this influx of all these international travelers. And I came home from work one day and looked out my bedroom window and saw the most gorgeous pair of legs. And I was like, I have to meet those legs. And, and so I met her. We had an amazing summer together. And then eventually she was like, I have to go back to Berlin. We kept in touch. And then off to Berlin I went. And I get there and I'm in East Germany. I mean, it was unified, but staying on the east side in a little town called Oranienburg. Then her and I moved into the city to Alexanderplatz in East Berlin. And, like anybody who doesn't speak the language, I got a job in a kitchen. I was washing dishes, prepping food, getting yelled at in German. And then I ended up just falling into this the most amazing position. I was a bar back at the Kit Kat Club, where I'm seeing people in full latex and gas masks getting it on the dance floor. And just, I mean, it was intense. From there, a bunch of us, my girlfriend and two other couples that were friends of ours, moved to Prague. And I ended up bartending in the Irish bar that was on the ground floor of our flat. That gentleman was wild on a whole different level. So he was a very interesting character, but had a side business in the back room, was selling weapons. Oh. And since we got to know each other and he knew my military background, that was a whole new business endeavor that we embarked on. At least, for me, it was more fun. It was definitely a business for him, but needless to say that my time in Praha was wild. It was all black label champagne, weird caviar out of Russia, and just a lot of nightclubbing. Being transgender has always been this, it was always that very dark secret that I kept in a closet, growing up in the 80s and 90s. The only...
So you knew that far back?
Oh, I knew since I was a child that, there was definitely something different. And, I knew, my mom knew, the therapist knew. Apparently everybody knew, but didn't know what to think. Because back then there was no Facebook groups. There was no social media. There was no LGBT center. For me, my experience with trans people were drag queens and prostitutes.
Right.
And I was just I cannot. Yeah. Those aren't the standards I've set for myself. And I didn't really set the standards very high, to be quite honest.
I feel like you did in a lot of ways.
I did for myself what I thought was right at the moment. Yeah. But it ruined so many relationships, and it ruined the one that I moved to California for. And, I love that girl so much, but it's hard to translate that love when you're dealing with so much self-hate.
Right.
For me, never got to really live my life. I was in a fraternity. I was in the Marines. I did everything to overcompensate to be what I thought I was supposed to be while suppressing who I really was, and it just got me into trouble. And I got very depressed, and this came up, and, next thing you know, I'm like addicted to drugs, and I'm fighting people, and, everything just kind of went sideways. And I did everything in my power to like hide all the pain and hide all the, the bad habits that I was doing. But there was as much I could do. At one point, it was just like, I just resigned myself that I was just like, this is it. This is the end for me. Like, I don't think I'm leaving San Francisco because I didn't think I was going to be, involved in living for much longer. This horrible time. But for me, it was a catalyst. Like, I had to get out. I had to go. And if I didn't go, then I don't think I would actually be here today. I mean, while I was there, yes, I bartended at great places. I worked at a winery in Sonoma. I was the wine educator for Norwegian Cruise Lines America and taught all the onboards on 3 different cruise ships about, the different major grades, the wines that we sold, how to upsell, and it was great. I got to wear the naval uniform during the day and a tux at night, dance with, older ladies in the clubs. And, I had a great time, but all of these things were just like superfluous to what I was going through.
Right.
I'm going to these cattle call interviews in San Francisco for bartending, and, I'm dressed in like a suit, tie, looking, all good, and I'm sitting next to some young kid in a Ramones t-shirt, ripped jeans, and, like Chuck Taylor's, trying to get a bartending job in the Mission because that was the cool place at the time, pardon me, and, man, I was just like, I know who's going to get hired here. I was just like, this is ridiculous. I was like, I don't have a chance. My girlfriend and I have broken up. She goes to our timeshare in Cabo, comes back. I get deathly ill. It's like around October, and I thought she had given me swine flu because that was like the pandemic at the moment.
Yeah.
And then it turned out to be pneumonia, and I almost died.
How did you find your way to New York and now as a partner in a liquor brand?
Well, let's see. I bartended. I opened up did opening bartending at some fine dining restaurants. Was a GM at another fine dining restaurant in Pittsburgh, and blah, blah, blah. Did the hospitality thing. And then I ended up as a bartender at a beer-centric restaurant in the Beaver County Mall. It was like one of those moments where, you really have to question the divine. Like, is there a higher power? Is there something in the universe that exists that's going to help you and guide you to where you're actually supposed to be? And that hand reached out one night, and, it's like a slow, I think it was like a Tuesday or Monday night, and I'm, one of those situations where you're bartending and waiting tables at the same time, and I get this 6-top of young people, and this hot young guy comes up to the bar from that party, and he's just like, hey, he's like, pick me out a beer and give me 2 of them. And I was just like, I look at him and like, you're not from around here, are you? He's like, no, I'm not. He's like, I'm visiting from New York City. And I was just like, yeah, I could see the disdain and the boredom in your face. So I took him over his beers, and he's like double fisting. And then the other 4 people left, and him and his girlfriend came up to the bar, and we start talking. And I'm just like, so what do you do in New York? He's like, I own a couple cocktail bars. And I was like, well, you don't say. And so we, we're talking, and we start geeking out over cocktails. Next thing you know, he's like behind the bar with me, and we're making drinks. And then he looks at me, he's like, what the hell are you doing? And I'm like, bartending. And he's like, no, what are you doing here? Like, why are you bartending at a restaurant in a mall in Beaver County, Pennsylvania? And I'm just like, I had family obligations. I came back here. There's a lot in my past. Had to help mom. Just needed to do this. And he's like, well, like I said, I own a couple bars. He's like, and I would love for you to come and open up my new cocktail bar. And, I'm excited. And, we're both probably pretty buzzed up at this point, and he left, and we exchanged information, and that was it. And I'm thinking this is just like your typical, bar talk. We're drunk, we're excited.
You get a lot of that.
Yeah, you get to meet someone of the same, kilt as you. And that was that. But I didn't think much of it. And then he came back because his girlfriend is from that area. So visiting her parents. And he was like, no, I'm dead serious. He's like, when can you come? I'm like, well, I was like, honestly, my grandfather just passed away. The obligations that I had before are not quite as, important. So yeah, I can come. So 2012, September 1st, I arrived in New York City with a duffel bag and a whole bunch of dreams.
Wow.
And this gentleman was Jeremy Strawn. He was one of the opening partners of Mulberry Project.
Oh, okay. I was like, this sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, him and Rael Pettit and a few other people that were running this place. And he's like, I'm opening this bar in Battery Park City. I want you to run it.